Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 166 on the Pranzata Podcast here on YouTube. Today is a solo episode. I actually did have a guest booked for today originally, but they did a no-show and I contacted them on Instagram and they left me on red, unfortunately. So that was very sad, but I will not be booking that guest again unless they have a good explanation. But I figured I would use the opportunity to do some solo content that I've been wanting to do. Today is going to be a little bit different than the norm. I am going to be doing a review of the black pill culture. I'm going to be explaining briefly what it is, and I'm going to be giving my opinion on it, and I'm going to be challenging some of the beliefs in the black pill culture. So just to explain why I wanted to do this episode today, I have a family member that I'm very close with who happens to be a young male in his 20s, and he confides in me a lot of things that he goes through as a young male. So I have this interesting perspective as a 37-year-old woman. I get to see sort of a POV view of what it's like to be a young male today. And the black pill culture is something that this young gentleman has shared a lot with me about. And I wanted to make a video about this for two reasons. One, I wanted to inform people because if anybody out there is curious about this sort of thing or who has kids, if somebody is closer to my age and is a parent of a young man, I think it's incredibly important to be aware and informed about what type of social communities are going online, on Reddit forums, etc. But secondly, I also wanted to give some pushback to the black pill culture because while I don't necessarily disagree with the black pill community and their statements overall, I do think a lot of elements of black pill can be very unhealthy for a young man when taken too seriously. So from my point of view, and I've been trying to keep my YouTube channel mainly about philosophy, but actually when I think about it, the black pill community is sort of a philosophy in itself, which is really fascinating when you think about it. One of the interesting things about the internet and internet culture is that you have all these cultures and subcultures being created. So there is a branch of different subcultures around modern dating and what that experience is like for men. You may have heard things like red pill, blue pill. God, there might even be white pill for all I know, but I'm not sure about that one. But for today's podcast episode, I'm going to be zeroing in specifically on black pill. If you want to do your own digging about what black pill culture is, a big name out there right now on YouTube in the black pill game is a guy called Waffles, and he has a rather impressive in-depth YouTube channel about this where I want to laugh at it and make fun of it, but at the same time, he puts a lot of effort to it, and not everything he says on his channel is false either. There is some truth, but I'm going to get more into that and explain what I mean by that. Before we get there, we have to first define what black pill is. In short, black pill is an online belief system or philosophy that believes that your success as a male in the dating market today is entirely determined on your genetics and your physical appearance. And if you are not what they would deem 7 or above, or in their language, Chad would be the highest possible genetically attractive male on the bell curve. If you are not a Chad or anything close to a Chad between the 7 to 10 range, there really isn't much you can do to change this fate. Your fate in the dating market is entirely determined by your physical appearance, and any attempts to improve it could be a waste of time. So, for very obvious reasons, I think this is a dangerous mindset to latch onto. And I see a lot of young men today, based on what I see from, this younger family member that I have, that I explained earlier in this video. A lot of men are really looking up to the rules and the language of black pill like it's a religion, or like it's law, or like all of this is fixed. I've chosen for today's video to rebuttal 5 points from the black pill culture, and there are a lot of different points, and like I said, you can go through this YouTuber Waffles if you want to learn more about that, but I've selected 5 themes and 5 points that I see showing up in these videos mostly. And the reason I want to go over this is because I think it's really dangerous to follow a really strict belief system around this, while, like I said earlier, I don't necessarily disagree with the theme at large. Looks help your success in the dating market. Of course, that's obvious. If you're more attractive or higher on the scale of 1 to 10, you're obviously going to have a better time. You're going to have a much easier time finding a mate. That's obvious. I mean, we're all human beings. We all look around. We all know what life is from our own personal experience. I can say that from my life experience, from my friend's life experience. That's obvious. I'm not really rebuttaling that point at large. But what I am concerned about is the idea that personal progress or any attempts to maybe raise your number on the physical attractiveness scale is a waste of time, and that if you don't have these certain set of looks that would bring you to the top of the scale or closer to the Chad or the Giga Chad, I've even heard that name thrown around, like the ultimate best looking man you could possibly be, that you're doomed and that you're not going to find a woman and you're not going to find a success. I think this is where we get into dangerous territory. Of course, be aware that overall, this is a true statement about better looks is going to be easier for you in terms of dating. Not in all circumstances, but in most circumstances. But that, if I can give an example from my personal life, one piece of advice that I got recently from a friend, which kind of changed my life, and I carry this piece of advice everywhere I go with me now, and I think about it in so many different situations, and I find it incredibly useful. And the advice that my friend gave me was, never believe in absolutes. I'm going to say that again. Never believe in absolutes. And now, obviously, there's going to be some things in life that are absolute. You can't go without water for a certain amount of time or you're going to die. You can't go without food for a certain amount of time, you're going to die. There's some obvious things in life that are absolutely true and there's no rebuttaling it. But I mean, there is no absolutes in terms of what is possible for your life, in terms of success and goals. And there's no absolutes in terms of social rules, you know? I mean, obviously, there might be absolutes in the terms of very specific things like, hey, don't murder or else you're not going to be liked. But then again, we can go into a philosophical discussion about that as well. There might be some situations where murder gets you a lot of praise. Like if we think of some modern examples, like, when I can't remember his name right now, but when the young gentleman ended up killing the CEO of the health insurance company. So things can get even murky there. So actually, I was doubting my own statement, but I bring it back. In terms of anything social, I don't think there are absolutes. Now, if I can make a comparison to my personal life, and please be patient, I'm going to get into the 5 points of the black pill community in a second, but I just want to give this as a little bit of inspiration for anybody listening to this. Where I use that phrase, don't believe in absolutes. Right now I'm podcasting, all right? I'm working on my YouTube channel. I have 166 episodes. This is episode 166 out. And right now we are in an extremely saturated, right now the YouTube podcast world is extremely saturated. My goal is to be successful on here. I would eventually like to reach a point where I have enough subscribers and enough views where I can make money and I can put more effort into this. More money equals more time to research different podcast guests, more time to just do research on my own in general. Like right now I'm working a full-time job and I wanted to do even more research on this video in particular, but my time is limited. So eventually my goal is to have some sort of success on here where I can make money from this podcast and I can use that money to then pour into the podcast, get better cameras, get better microphones, etc. If I were to think from the mindset of, well, everything's saturated these days in terms of YouTube, everybody's trying to be the next Joe Rogan, so you don't have a chance. With so many people on TikTok and social media and AI coming, it's going to replace your jobs and we don't even need podcasters anymore because AI is going to do a better job. My odds are against me. You know what I mean? Like if I make the social comparison, it's like, I'm not the Giga Chad of the podcast world right now. And I don't, in terms of like where I'm at, there's so many different podcasters who are smarter than me and better looking than me and has more money for equipment. But I'm going to take that piece of advice that I got, that there are no absolutes in life. I'm not going to let those odds determine my fate. And I think anybody who is a black pillar should take that same line of thinking and apply it to the dating world, and not allow these really strict guidelines to determine your success as a man. In my opinion, I think that people who fall victim to things like black pill, and I don't mean to offend anybody when I say this, but it's just something I've noticed from my personal perspective. People who fall in this line of thinking are probably looking for an excuse to not put more work in. I think it's, in a sense, easier to just say, well, I could say that about my podcasting. I could say, well, what are my chances anyways? The odds are against me, so what's the point of even trying? I might as well give up. But I think that's a cop-out. And I think it's the same thing for people who take this very seriously. I think it's a cop-out to believe that, well, if I'm not Giga Chad, if I'm not 6'5", if I'm not, or even 6 foot for that matter, if I don't have the right bone structure or facial structure, then I might as well give up. And I think, I say this with love because I think some people need to hear it. I think that's cowardly. I think that's making excuses to, and I feel guilty saying that because I understand, especially for a younger man, that I don't know what it's like to be a younger man today. So I don't want to have a prejudgment on an experience that I will never get to experience. I'm a female. I've been a young female, but I've never been a young man. So I don't want to prejudge, but at the same time, as a human being, not even just a man or a woman, as a human being, I think one of the most courageous things you can do is to change your mindset about your circumstances. I can't say I know what it's like as a female. I can't say I know what it's like to not find a mate. Females have a pretty easy time in general compared to men, but I do know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to have chronic pain. I know what it's like to be in poverty. I know what it's like to be depressed, to be anxious, to be suicidal even. I've been through all kinds of things in my life, and what I've had to do is turn my mindset around. So enough of that. Let's get into the actual content of the video. So I have a list here. Point number 1, short guys are sexually invisible. I'm going to repeat that again. Short guys are sexually invisible to females and they don't have a chance. I'm going to say that, well, when I respond to this, I'm also not going to say everything's entirely false because I think a lot of these are half-truths, like I said in the beginning of this episode. It's not that I disagree with some of these statements at whole. I just think when you zero in, there's a lot of things that you can look at that are false. So speaking from personal experience, we're going to state the obvious here. Clearly, height is going to help you. If a woman has a choice, between a short guy and a tall guy, and that's the only thing she has to know about. She doesn't know anything about their personalities, about their interests. All she sees is their height. More than likely, she's probably going to be more interested in the tall guy. That's true. But that's the larger view experience. When we zero in and we funnel in on some closer details, I can speak from personal experience about people I've dated. I've dated both tall guys and short guys. Right now I'm dating a short guy. My boyfriend, we've been in a relationship for 5 or 6 months now. And so far it's been the best relationship I've ever been in my entire life. I'm having very good feelings about it. I think he probably, I'm 37 years old. So I'm hoping that he's the one, but I really think he is. I've dated taller guys than him. I've dated guys that were 6'5". I could have married them and I didn't. I ended those relationships. And how tall is my boyfriend? I want to say he told me he's 5'8", but I don't believe him because I feel like he's much closer to my height. So I'm going to say he's like 5'6" and then maybe 5'7" with shoes on. He says he's 5'8". I don't believe him, but I think a lot of guys lie about their height for, the reasons we're talking about. And his height has not been a factor at all in our relationship. Am I going to lie and say that in the past, before dating him, I didn't see a tall guy on the street and it turned my head? No, I'm not going to lie about that. Yeah, that obviously helps, but that absolutely doesn't determine who I end up with. I'm with my boyfriend because I find him incredibly attractive despite his height. He's a very athletic, like BMX biker. So he has a great physique despite, the fact that he's on the shorter side. He's incredibly intelligent, incredibly intuitive, emotionally intelligent, very responsible. There's just so many things I love about him that his height isn't a factor at all to me. So now, if I zero in on some more specifics, because I don't want to sugarcoat things either, if I can give some examples where I did turn a guy down because of their height. I've never turned a guy down because of their height specifically, but in the past, and I'm going to be honest here, in the past, I wasn't dating him. I was kind of seeing him, and we were very good friends that we would flirt with each other, and I was interested, but something kept holding me back from wanting to pursue things further. We did hook up on one occasion, I'm not going to lie. When that happened, that kind of made me reconsider, like, okay, is this something I want to pursue, or is this something I kind of want to walk away from and just be this person's friend? This particular gentleman was short. It was a factor, but it wasn't specifically that he was short. I'm going to be totally blunt here when I say this, and some people might not like this, but he was short and out of shape. And again, I'm not going to completely discredit everything black pill. I'm not going to say, well, that's completely false. Height doesn't matter. I think I've said this before on a different podcast, and I'm going to, revisit this idea. Think of your life like a video game character. Sometimes when you play video games and you choose a character, I remember they had this in Sims. Like I don't really play very many modern video games, but back when I was younger, I played Sims, and you would make your character and you were allowed different attributes. And if you said, hey, you know what, I want to be generous, and you wanted 10 points of generous, then they would take away, okay, if you want to be generous, you're not also allowed to be smart. Like they wouldn't let you have it all. They would give you a certain ingredients, and you had to do the best you can with it. So if you're a guy who knows that, all right, in my Sims character in this world, I wasn't given height, then maybe you can't afford to be fat too, And as harsh as that is to say, looking back at this guy, I was like, he was very smart, and intelligence is a big one for me. Obviously I'm a podcaster. I like ideas. So I feel like a lot of my heart gets opened up by a good conversation. So we really connected in the sense that we had these wonderful conversations with each other. But where things fell short, no pun intended, was that I wasn't entirely physically attracted to him because he didn't take care of his physique. And I just think that pair of, well, you're short, and on top of that, you kind of let your physique go and you have a lot of extra weight on you. I'm like, to me, that's just a no-brainer. If you're on the shorter side, well, maybe you should put a little more effort into your physique. That's something you can control. You can't control the height you were given, but you can definitely control, how much fat you have on your body for the most part, unless you have some type of illness that stops you. But this wasn't the case. I saw how he lived his life. I saw how he ate. And I think it's a shame because we had a great connection, but if I'm going to be honest, I didn't feel completely physically attracted to the fact that he wasn't taking care of his body. And if I compare that to my current boyfriend, like I said, yeah, he's short. He's pretty much my height. He's looks like about 5'6" to me, but he takes such good care of his body that it's not even an issue whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I actually really like it because I feel like when we're getting affectionate with each other and we're kissing, it's like he's at my level and I feel so close with him. It's a different experience. Like when I've dated taller guys, I sort of feel very feminine in contrast to them. But in this case, I feel like it's like he's my soulmate. He's my equal. I can just look him right in the eyes, and it's just a wonderful feeling to actually be the same height as the person I'm with. But like I said, he takes very good care of his physique, and that kind of balances things out in that area. Okay, point number 2 on my list. Another common theme or thread that I see in the black pill community is that if a man is not attractive by his early 20s, he will never be. Meaning that his physical appearance is pretty much fixed and there's not much he can do to change that. I'm going to say that is entirely false from my opinion. I don't even think there's any half-truths in there. The height one, I felt like there was some partial truths, which I explained. But I think this one is completely false. I think that when I actually think about it, when I look around and I think about my friends and I think about the people that I find attractive or I don't find attractive, there really are very few people I know that are truly ugly in the sense that they're hopeless. 9 out of 10 times when I find somebody less attractive, it's either because they don't take care of their physique at all, or they just have the worst personality. And there are things you can do to work on both of these things. And I think pretty much there has to be, in order to be like a truly ugly person, there would have to be some type of serious deformity. Like you would have to have like the biggest nose, or like your eyes are touching. I don't actually know that many people who look like that. I mean, just think about the people in your life. Even, let's say there's some guys in your life that are overweight, or, they're not going out, they're gaming too much, that sort of thing. Are any of them actually that ugly when you look at them to a point where they're hideously ugly? I mean, I think just like it's very rare to find Giga Chad, it's extremely rare to find somebody who looks like an AI model. It's also extremely rare to find a very ugly person. I think most people have inner beauty. People could say 6, 7, 10. And personally, I actually think that those lines are a lot more blurry than people realize. I think when you encompass the entire human being and their personality and their sense of humor and even the way they smell and the way they dress and the way they take care of themselves and their charisma and how they walk into a room, and do they have a positive energy? Do they have a negative energy? It can go in the reverse as well. I've known some men who were very attractive, like at first glance physically, but then you get to know their personality and it just kind of weighs you down. And you're like, you're actually good looking, but your personality is so negative and so miserable that it brings you down to this ugliness. So before I get too off track here, I think that the majority of human beings, unless they have some severe deformity, can do things to improve. They can do major life transformations. I mean, literally just Google right now, do it on your own. Google fitness transformation 6 months or fitness transformation 1 year, male, and then just watch how men can seriously transform themselves by putting effort into this. And it's not just your fitness, it's your diet, and it's your intellectual diet as well. You know what I mean? Are you scrolling TikTok or Instagram all day and just taking in junk food mental content? Or are you trying to open and expand your mind? Are you working on your spirituality? There's so many things that somebody can do to expand themselves and make themselves quote unquote more beautiful. I mean, I've seen some people do some serious transformations. I mean, what's one of the public ones? If I can give an example, what is it? Jelly Roll. He was severely obese and he just lost a bunch of weight, and he's still going. He's still losing more weight. It can be done. It's possible. And I don't think, no, I completely reject if a man is not attractive by his early 20s, he will never be. I completely reject that entirely. Again, the theme of this episode is never believe in absolutes. It's going to take work. I mean, I'm trying to look for some truth here. I guess the one truth is it's going to take work. If you're unwilling to put the work in, if you're unwilling to be honest with yourself, if you're unwilling to be completely brutally honest with yourself about the things you need to work on, then yeah, in that case, you might never have a chance to have success in the dating market. But if you're willing to put the work in and you're willing to be honest, then I think there are no limits here. Okay, point number 3. social skills cannot overcome genetic unattractiveness. I'm going to say this again. Social skills cannot overcome genetic unattractiveness. Or put simply, if you're ugly, there's nothing that you can do with your personality that can overcome that. I'm going to look for a partial truth in here, but right now I can't find any obvious ones. I'm going to immediately say this is false. And the reason for that is I can think of so many really funny comedians that are unattractive that have had very hot girlfriends. Louis C.K. has had many very hot girlfriends. Oh my God, what's the big famous one right now? Shane Gillis. I'm not saying Shane Gillis is ugly. I actually think he's relatively attractive compared to some other comedians I've seen, but his girlfriend is like super hot, you know, and a lot of that is because of how goddamn funny and successful he is. So no, I think sense of humor is a social skill that can greatly outweigh physical appearance. You know, at the end of the day, women want to feel good around the men they're with, and not just women, people want to feel good around the people they're with. I can think of an example in my life personally where actually I feel even bad bringing this one up, but I do need to, you know, bring this up to make my case. I had an ex-boyfriend who, at first glance, I did find him physically unattractive, and he was interested in me, and I rejected him initially. Now, we had been working on a group project together. I'm a musician, so we were working on a music project together and with a group of people, not just the two of us. And over time, I started to see him differently as I got to know him. So while initially I didn't find him conventionally attractive at all, I wasn't physically attracted to him. As time went on, I started to get to know his personality, and his personality really won me over. And just like magic, I started to see him as an attractive person when I originally didn't. So to bring back this point, social skills cannot overcome genetic unattractiveness. In this case, that's entirely false. Now, okay, here's the partial truth. The partial truth is that the genetic attractiveness obviously mattered at first glance. And I guess that's why a lot of young men complain about dating apps, because in dating apps, you don't get a chance to prove your social skills because, well, unless you chat, but that you can't chat unless you get a match. So yeah, I think a lot of young men are frustrated by dating apps because if they're not Giga Chad, you know, at first glance, they don't even get a chance to prove their sense of humor or their social skills. But in this case, I was in a unique situation where I had no choice but to get to know him because we were in a cover band together. So I had to meet up with him every single week and rehearse with him. And over time, I not only was I unattracted to him, but I hope he never sees this, but I thought he was very ugly, if I'm being quite honest about that. But weirdly enough, over time, not only did I find him attractive, but I was like lusting hot. Like I thought he was hot. Like I was lusting over him. Like I couldn't get enough of him after some time. And it was because I wouldn't say he had this great sense of humor. He was funny, but he didn't have this like comedic sense of humor like we mentioned with, you know, Shane Gillis and Louis C.K. It was because he was just, there was a lot of different things. Sense of humor was part of it, but he had this like kindness and this genuine authenticity to him that I hadn't seen in that many people, that you don't see every day. He was just kind and very authentic and very open and very quirky and very weird in a unique way, that all of a sudden the things that I thought were unattractive to him, it was like I had new goggles on. It was like I had rose-covered goggles and I saw the good in him. And we ended up living together for 2 years. And I didn't break up with him because of his looks. As a matter of fact, when we broke up, I still was very sexually attracted to him. I broke up with him due to certain behaviors that he had. He struggled with some, you know, addiction behaviors and that sort of thing. And that was what kind of, you know, did it for me. But none of that was related to his appearance. So I'm going to completely reject the idea that social skills cannot overcome genetic unattractiveness. Charisma, sense of humor, kindness, uniqueness, quirkiness can really go a long way. And I think a place you could start is just taking a step back from how do I get a girl to like me, and invest some of your time and energy into things that you love as well. So, in the case of this person, he was a great musician. So I was very attracted to the fact that he was putting a lot of, dedication into his music. I think that speaks volumes, because if somebody, has something they're passionate about, that in itself is this immense positive trait, that women just love, and men love too, quite frankly. Who doesn't love a passionate person? But yeah, I like I said, I wanted to try to credit this because I'm a believer that you can't just, I'm a believer that in order to make your case, you also have to, you can't just straw man the argument. You also have to strong man it, meaning you can't just put down the argument altogether. You also actually have to find what's good in it. So I actually, for each one of these points, I genuinely am trying to find the truth in each one of these to make as clear of a case as possible. And the only truth I can find in that one, social skills cannot overcome genetic unattractiveness. The only truth that I see in it is that attractiveness matters at first glance, but all the rest of it, I don't see any truth in. Okay, number 4. Women instantly categorize men as dateable or undateable within seconds permanently. This is a half-truth because actually I wish I didn't just give the example of my ex, because this also applies to this situation as well. But yeah, to reiterate that, at first glance, I said no to my ex. And then over time, after getting to know his personality, I said yes. So this is a half-truth. It is true that women at first glance will take in your whole essence. And mind you, your whole essence isn't just how you look on a 1 to 10 attractiveness scale. Your whole essence is how you look plus how your voice sounds, how you smell, how your hygiene is, how your speaking is. It's just you as a whole, And again, to reiterate something I said before, it's really hard to do this on a dating app, because on a dating app, you're just getting a physical snapshot of a person, which only really highlights a very two-dimensional look at the person. You're not seeing the whole picture. There's some people that, this can go both ways. There's some people that are physically beautiful to look at first glance, and then you get near them and you're like, oh, I can't stand the sound of their voice, or I don't like the way they smell. There's something about the way they speak that is really off-putting. And then the other way around, I've seen people that just by photo, you're like, there's really not much there, but then you meet them in person and they have this amazing charisma. So to reiterate this one, do women instantly categorize men as dateable or undateable within seconds? They categorize men as fuckable within seconds. Do they want to have sex with them without knowing them? Like, would a woman be willing to have sex with this person on the spot? Within seconds, a woman can answer yes or no to that. But dateable, and the interesting thing about women is that once their heart opens up, somebody that they didn't find attractive, they can all of a sudden find very sexually attractive. So that's the interesting thing, is that if you're somebody who is not so physically attractive, dating apps probably aren't the best for you, because you need to prove your worth over a longer period of time. So in that case, you need to join social groups and make friends. Like I said, in my case, I had met this person in a music band. We were in a band together, and after being forced in these projects for a long period of time, I got to know his personality, and I ended up becoming very attracted to him. So if you are one of these men that feel like you're not having any success on dating apps because you're not very conventionally attractive, then you might want to put yourself in a situation where you can socialize and you can show the positive sides of your personality. But I also want to make this point, like I said earlier in the video, if you're not I was rebuttaling the point that there's nothing you can do about your looks. If you're not attractive by the age of 20, then you're screwed. That's not true. Another thing is, if you are one of these men who get instantly rejected by women within seconds. There are many things you can do to change your physical appearance. And a lot of that starts with your diet, your hygiene, and your exercise. And I think that could do wonders. That could literally take somebody from a 5 to a 7 or a 6 to an 8 very easily if enough work and dedication is put into that. Okay, number 5. The last one on this list is women will lose attraction once they see emotional vulnerability in men. I'm going to repeat that. Women will lose attraction once they see emotional vulnerability in men. Or in other words, if you get emotional around a woman, she will no longer be attracted to you. I'm going to say this is 80% false with a small 20% of truth. And I'm going to explain that. First of all, the idea that a woman does not ever want to see her man emotional, for the majority of healthy, centered women, this is going to be false. Of course, there are going to be some women that are a little toxic or are closed off emotionally themselves that are not going to like an emotional man. But the kind of woman that you want, the kind of woman that's going to be the mother of your children, or the kind of woman that's going to be a nurturer, or the type of woman who's going to be loyal by your side for the rest of your life, whatever you're looking for, if you're looking for good qualities of a woman, these women are going to want to see a man become open and vulnerable and emotional. If I could give some concrete examples of great men out there who cry on camera all the time, Joe Rogan, one of the most successful, deemed as this highly masculine man. I mean, he's so supposedly masculine that actually some women, some type of, feminist type of women can't stand him. But I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen him crying on camera. In one instance, I remember he was talking about a dog who passed away, and he started crying because he loved this dog. It was his favorite dog. Or in another podcast episode, he was talking about female fighters, and he was going into this description about how the spirit of a fighter has nothing to do with your gender. It has to do with your courageous spirit. And he started breaking down crying when he was talking about, I'm getting the chills talking about it, because like he really, what's so beautiful about that and why it actually is an attractive quality about him is because there's an authenticity to it. He's like tapping into this very deep part of himself that he's sharing with the world. But he was saying that he was thinking about this female fighter, and he was reflecting on, at first glance, how feminine and beautiful and pretty she was, and how almost docile and dainty she was at physical appearance. But she ended up being the champion of her, field that she was. And I don't remember what exactly it was, of like what section of MMA it was, if it was boxing or whatever. I don't know exactly what it was, but I just remember whatever her field was, she ended up being the number one champion of that year. And he just started crying that what a beautiful thing it was, that it really had nothing to do with like her masculine energy. She was actually very docile and feminine, but it had to do with her spirit, with her courage and her confidence. And he just started crying on camera. And I thought that was such an attractive thing. And I can think of some other really great examples. For the longest time, I had the biggest crush on podcaster Lex Friedman. And actually going back to the short thing, we're saying like your height doesn't matter. He's actually very short. I think he's like 5'4". He might even be shorter than me. But I had such a big crush on him due to the fact of how emotional he is and how vulnerable he is. I mean, just go on his Instagram and look through some of his like writings, or his Twitter, look through some of his writings, and you'll see how down to earth and sweet and emotional he actually is. Jordan Peterson, I've brought him up a lot of times on my podcast. He's one of the philosophical leaders of our day that I really look up to. And God, he can't stop crying. He won't stop crying on camera. But again, he's one of those influential men out there who are seen as overly masculine, and feminine types of women won't look up to him because of toxic masculinity. But then you have this contrast where he's crying all the time on camera, which some might view as a feminine quality. So, this idea that in order to be this very attractive man, you can't cry. I mean, that's absolutely false. You can't get emotional. Now, like I said, there is a partial truth here. The partial truth is what you're crying about, and in the context of what you're crying about. Now, if there is a if I'm living with a man and there's a mouse in the house and I start crying and I look to him for help and he starts crying, yeah, that's going to piss me off and that's going to be very unattractive. So, when you have to be the hero or the leader in that moment, that's not the time to start crying. That is very unattractive. So that's where the partial truth is that, yeah, you can't cry when you're supposed to step up and be the hero, but you can absolutely cry in times of reflection, and you can get emotional in times of reflection. As a matter of fact, certain figures like Andrew Tate, for example, like these extreme, tough, masculine, don't get emotional type of guys, I find that very unattractive, like the earlier men I'd mentioned. Chris, here's another good one. Chris Williamson. He himself referred to himself recently on his podcast as an emotional Chad, which is funny. He's basically saying he's like this fitness, like he's got this, like he was a model. He has this incredible face, and he was this like fitness guy. Short though, by the way. Another case of the shorties. He's only like 5'8". But he's incredibly emotional. He's been, I listen to his podcast as well, and he's been talking a lot about how this past year he's been going through some chronic illness and that sort of thing, and he's been more emotional than ever. And a whole new direction of his podcast lately is encouraging young men who are overachievers, because he's an overachiever and a lot of his listeners are overachievers. I actually happen to be a little bit masculine in that sense, that I'm a big achiever. Like I love to work really hard. And he's been really encouraging his listeners who tend to be type A, overachievers, to not ignore their emotional side and to allow themselves to become more vulnerable and take rests when they need to and honor their emotions and cry when they have to cry. He's been doing a lot of that, and I find it so incredibly attractive, like that duality in his nature. While he's this like he said, this Chad who has this beautiful face and he works out, but he's also this in touch with his feminine side as well. I mean, I think it's such a beautiful dynamic to have in a person. And I would much rather that over this like really stiff Andrew Tate type of guy who always shows his masculine side and never shows his feminine side. Most women don't find him attractive. And the type of women who find Andrew Tate attractive are the ones who just want money. Another thing that might be something that goes around in Black Pill, but I'm not sure if this is specific to Black Pill or just a generalization overall. But a lot of people believe that women only want money. Certain women only want money. Sex workers or strippers or gold diggers only want money. Certain women who care about status only want money. But there's plenty of wonderful, good-hearted women out there who want a man for much more than just money. I mean, obviously, there needs to be a certain amount of financial stability in a man. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you're the mother of his child and he doesn't have the money to support the family. But this idea that, you have to be this incredibly wealthy guy or else no woman's going to want you. And it's like, well, what type of women are you trying to attract? If you're trying to attract like sex workers or these kind of like bimbo, big fake titted Miami type chicks, then yeah, that might be true. But if you want, And there isn't this dichotomy of like, there's either hot bimbos with fake tits and there's like ugly regular women. There's also some very, if you want an attractive woman, there's also some very sexy and hot and attractive women who have good hearts too. They do exist and they are out there, and not all of them want your money. I think the type of women who are attracted to Andrew Tate are the ones who want the fame and the status and the prestige of being with him. And I think that it's a mistake to look up to somebody like that and assume that you have to only show your masculine qualities and you can never show your feminine qualities. Keeping in mind that, like I said, there's a time and place. You don't want to be so in touch with your feminine side, but never be in touch with your masculine side. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be only spilling out your emotions, but never show any signs of courageousness or bravery. If I think of all those specific examples that I gave, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Chris Williamson, Lex Friedman, they're all very in touch with their feminine side, but they all have this like duality flip side where they're incredibly courageous, badass, hardworking, persistent, resilient. So it's not a matter of, oh, if I'm just in touch with my emotions, then I'll get a woman. Yeah, but no, but you also have to be in touch with your masculine side as well. I think it's not so much just the feminine side, it's the duality of the masculine and the feminine. And I think weirdly enough, I think the same goes true for women too. I think some of the most attractive women that I know that I think are successful in their dating lives are the ones who are very feminine and sweet and sexy, but also have this badass side to them. Like they're really good at a hobby, or they dedicate their life to their fitness, or, you know, I do know women like that where I'm like, you know, she's very pretty and she's very beautiful and she's very loyal to her man, but shit, she's also a fucking fierce, like badass in this area. I just think as human beings, it's really cool to be in touch with both sides of your nature. And I think, that's always a good thing to aim for. But anyways, those are my 5 points. And like I said, if you're curious to know more about this type of stuff, a lot of these things I learned from a YouTuber called Waffles, which is a funny name, but he puts a lot of work into his YouTube. I'm not going to like discredit the work he's put into it, but I think ultimately, it's a dangerous mental path to go down to think that these ideas are law. I don't think these ideas are law. And to revisit the thesis of this podcast episode, nothing is set in stone. There are no absolutes when it comes to your success and social things like that. I think that if you believe that you're limited because of these things, then you're only limiting yourself. I think if you open your mind to different possibilities, what is it? The Bruce Lee quote. I'm paraphrasing this quote, but I love it. It's something, be like water and be formless. Change form when you need to. So for example, if water, let me just chat GPT this quote, because if I try to say it by heart, I'm going to mess it up. Hold on. Okay, here it goes. Be like water, my friend. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. It's a metaphor about adaptability and flexibility. So, how to tie that into Black Pill? Is it true that your looks play a big part in your success as a man in dating today? Of course, that's true. You know, obviously better looking people have it easier. But don't let that determine your success. Be like water. If you're a short guy, to be like water might be like, okay, well, let me take care of my physique. You know, you don't have the best looking face. Work on a sense of humor, you know, work on your personality, work on your values. Are you a kind person, a generous person? Do you bring good energy to the room? You know what I mean? Be like water, change and adapt to your circumstances. The only things in life that are fixed are very specific things, like you need food to live, you know what I mean? But certain social things, I think one of the beautiful things about life is that part of the game of life is to figure out how to find solutions to your specific ingredients that you have. You know, whatever you're given in life, you're not given the answer to the path, but you are given strengths and weaknesses, and you can use your strength to your advantage, and you can strengthen your weaknesses, and nothing is fixed. You can achieve anything you want to achieve in this life if you put your mind to it and you're dedicated and resilient. But anyways, that's it. Pranzata Podcast, episode 166. If anybody has anything to say in response to this, please leave your comments below. Hit like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Help me grow this channel. And that's it. Have a good day, guys. Bye.